Before the Zodiac Stones corrupted Ivalice's heroes, a different rebellion threatened the kingdom. They were called traitors, brigands, the Corpse Brigade. Veterans discarded after the 50 Years' War, left to rot by the nobles they bled for. But their uprising held a secret, one that would echo through the War of the Lions and beyond. Led by Wiegraf and his family, they sparked a fire that connected to forces far darker than any king. This is the story history tried to erase. The rebellion that began before demons walked the earth. This is the story of the Corpse Brigade. But to understand why they rose, you have to understand what broke them. 50 years of war. When it ended, Ivalice's soldiers got nothing. No pay, no honors, only silence. The 50 Years' War against Ordalia drained the kingdom dry. Nobles locked their gates. Commoners who had bled beside them were thrown out like livestock. Among the discarded, Wiegraf Folles and his dead men, peasant fighters once hailed as heroes, now branded liabilities. The gap between noble and commoner widened into a chasm. In that chasm, something darker than rebellion took root. The Corpse Brigade's uprising wasn't only about justice. It was the spark that would awaken the Lucavi. This is where the demons began. But demons cannot enter Ivalice on their own. They need vessels. They need desperation. They need humans broken enough to reach for power, no matter the cost. And Ivalice was creating those humans by the thousands. The 50 Years' War did not abruptly end. It collapsed. And in the wreckage, the kingdom abandoned the very soldiers who bled for its survival. Commoners who fought, who sacrificed, who believed their service meant something. They were wrong. The Corpse Brigade did not start as outlaws. They were soldiers, heroes, men and women who bled for a kingdom that forgot their names. Wiegraf Folles earned his knighthood on the battlefield, not in a noble's court. No bloodline, no inheritance, just merit, forged in fire. He led the dead men, commoners who risked everything, while nobles watched from castle walls. His sister, Milleuda, fought beside him. They believed their sacrifice meant something. The war ended. The kingdom did not honor them. It dismissed them, erased them. Wiegraf watched his soldiers beg in the streets. He watched them turn to crime just to eat. He watched the kingdom discard them like broken tools. Something inside him fractured. He began gathering the forgotten, former soldiers with nowhere to go, starving villagers with nothing left to lose, young men who saw the lie behind every noble promise. They did not fight for gold. They fought for the dignity the crown stole from them. To the nobility, they were insurgents, dangerous radicals threatening the natural order. But to the poor, they were hope. Proof that someone would stand when the powerful expected them to kneel. Wiegraf knew justice would never be given. It had to be taken. The name they chose was deliberate. The Corpse Brigade. Because that is what Ivalice made them. Corpses in waiting. Already dead to their lords. Already buried by history before they stopped breathing. But Wiegraf refused to die quietly. And neither would his dead men. But who were these dead men? What kind of leader could turn discarded soldiers into a force that shook Ivalice? Wiegraf Folles earned his knighthood in blood. He led the dead men through the 50 Years' War, peasant soldiers who fought while nobles counted coin. Merit earned his knighthood, not inheritance. His allies respected him, his enemies feared him, and Ivalice used him. But post-war Ivalice had no place for peasant heroes. His sense of justice, already sharpened by bloodshed, hardened, unyielding, dangerous. He believed the nobility had forfeited the right to rule. Even as he led a rebellion, he clung to ideals. He condemned cruelty that served no purpose. Wiegraf Folles, the sword maiden of the brigade, fought beside her brother, younger but no less fierce. On the battlefield at Lanalian Plateau, she faced the nobles who called her chattel. "We are not chattel," she shouted. "We are humans, no less than you." She was not merely a soldier, she was a symbol, proof that the forgotten could stand, could fight, could demand dignity. Her death broke Wiegraf. The ideals he fought for, dignity, justice, righteousness, they had cost him the one person who embodied them. Every compromise felt like betrayal. Every pragmatic choice felt like surrender. His grief hardened into something colder, purer, unforgiving. Gustav Margraf defected from the Northern Sky, sickened by war's atrocities. But he traded principle for survival. The Elmdore kidnapping was his idea. Pragmatic funding for the rebellion. Wiegraf saw cowardice, a stain on their cause. Their confrontation was brief. Wiegraf cut him down. Not for treason, for disgrace. Grageroth Levine rose in the brigade's final days. A hardline loyalist. He believed survival justified any act. Where Wiegraf sought justice, Grageroth wanted payback. Where Milleuda saw dignity, he saw weakness. He led the raid on Igros Castle. He kidnapped Tietra Heiral, a child. He refused to surrender at Fort Zeakden. Not when surrounded, not when defeat was certain, not even when it meant everyone would die. Grageroth did not care about righteousness. He cared about making the nobles bleed. In the end, he lit the fuse that destroyed the Corpse Brigade. Together, these four set the rebellion's arc. Wiegraf's ideals, Milleuda's fire, Gustav's pragmatism, Grageroth's vengeance. A movement with a soul, a wound, and a trigger. The Corpse Brigade was never going to survive, but its death would reshape Ivalice. The question was not if it would fall, but what would rise from its ashes. But before the fall came the fire. The Corpse Brigade declared war without words. Their first strike, a noble tax caravan on the Galleon Road. The brigade cut down the guards, scattered the gold across the dirt, and left the wagons burning. No ransom demands, just a message written in ash. The old order was bleeding. The raids escalated. The brigade severed supply lines. They ambushed noble patrols on roads the aristocracy thought they owned. These were not desperate bandits. They were soldiers who knew how the kingdom worked and exactly where to cut. But raids were not enough. The brigade needed funding, weapons, legitimacy. Then came the Elmdore incident. Marquis Elmdore de Limberry, war hero and decorated noble, was seized and held for ransom. Gustav Margraf called it pragmatic funding for a starving rebellion, necessary sacrifice for the cause. Wiegraf saw betrayal. he tracked Gustav to a desert hideout. They had fought together for years, bled together. But when Wiegraf found him, he did not hesitate. He executed Gustav, not for treason, for disgrace. He released Elmdore unharmed, saying, "Craven methods serve not our ends." That line in the sand cost him allies. But Wiegraf believed the brigade had to be better than the nobles they fought. Righteousness, the refusal to become monsters, was the only thing separating rebellion from banditry. Milleuda believed it too. At Lanalian Plateau, the sword maiden of the brigade faced Ramza Beoulve and the Order of the Northern Sky, the Crown's elite knights. Outnumbered, outflanked, she refused to retreat. She fought until her body gave out. Not because she thought she could win, because surrender meant admitting the nobles were right, that peasants belonged on their knees. The Sword Maiden fell. When the battle ended, a courier brought a dark message to a doomed cause. Wiegraf carefully examined the message's contents and steeled himself. No ceremony, no honors. Just another casualty the kingdom would forget. Something in him broke that day. The ideals he clung to, justice, dignity, righteousness, had cost him the one person who embodied them. After the plateau, Wiegraf stopped talking about justice. The brigade's final operation was not about ideals. It was about making those nobles bleed. Graegaroth Levine led the assault on Egros Castle. The target, Dystarg Beoulve, architect of the Crown's crackdown. The mission failed, but in the chaos, Graegaroth seized Tietra Heiral, a child, daughter of a minor noble and ward of House Beoulve. Not a soldier, not a combatant, a child. A hostage, leverage, desperation. Wiegraf did not order it, but he did not stop it. The Corpse Brigade had crossed the line he had once defended, and the kingdom would make them pay for it. Fort Zeakden was waiting. No one was coming to save them, but someone was coming to save her. Delita Heiral had joined House Beoulve as a commoner squire, clawing his way into nobility's ranks alongside his childhood friend Ramza. His sister Tietra, 13 years old, adopted into the Beoulve household, was supposed to be safe, protected, untouchable. Then the Corpse Brigade took her. Now, the Order of the Northern Sky had driven the rebels north through Gallium, cutting off every escape route, burning every safe house. By the time the brigade reached Fort Zeakden, a snowbound ruin abandoned since the 50 Years' War, fewer than 30 fighters remained, and one hostage. Wiegraf Folles was not there. The man who had built the Corpse Brigade from grief and rage, who had executed his own lieutenant for dishonor, who had buried his sister in the mud at Lanalian Plateau. At the moment his rebellion faced annihilation, its founder had vanished. Some said he fled. Others whispered he had gone searching for power the nobles could not match. But when the siege began, leadership fell to Graegaroth Levine, a soldier who had run out of options. Surrounded, outnumbered 10-1. No reinforcements, no supplies, no path to escape. Graegaroth filled Fort Zeakden's lower chambers with powder kegs, relics from the old war, unstable and deadly. He sent his ultimatum to the Order: withdraw your forces, or we ignite the fort and kill everyone inside. The nobles did not withdraw. Zalbag Beoulve, commander of the Northern Sky and son of House Beoulve, ordered the assault. No negotiations, no mercy. The brigade had kidnapped a child, disrupted the kingdom's recovery, and murdered crown soldiers. Tietra's life, tragic as her death might be, was not worth the precedent of yielding to rebels. But it was Argith Thedolphus who saw the equation clearly. A low-born knight desperate to prove his worth to a nobility that despised his common blood. He understood the stalemate. The brigade would not surrender while they held leverage. The Order could not storm the fort while Tietra lived. Remove the hostage, and the rebels lose their only shield. They would either surrender or die. Simple, efficient, necessary. He raised his crossbow. Delita stood 20 yards away, watching the fort's entrance, waiting for a chance to reach his sister. Argith did not aim at Graigoroth. He did not aim at the rebels barricaded behind the snow-covered walls. He aimed at Tietra. The bolt flew. Time collapsed. The projectile crossed the distance in a heartbeat, a dark line against white snow, spinning through frozen air. It struck her in the chest. Tietra Heiral fell without a sound. Her small body crumpled into the snow, blood spreading outward in a slow, inevitable bloom. Red on white, ink on parchment. Delita Heiral watched his sister die. Not in battle, not defending the kingdom, not even caught in crossfire. She died because a noble officer decided her life was worth less than the inconvenience of a siege. Because the aristocracy that had adopted her into their household valued order over her breath. In that moment, the sides did not matter. Rebel, loyalist, commoner, noble. The lines that divided Ivalice into factions and classes, none of it mattered. She was gone. Inside the fort, Graigoroth Levine froze. He stared at the body in the snow. The hostage, the only thing keeping the Order from storming Zeakden, was dead. The ultimatum had collapsed. The powder kegs below meant nothing now. They had lost. Delita moved first. He turned on Argith Thedolphus, blade already drawn. No hesitation, no words, no trial. Just rage and steel, and the sound of a sword cutting through a man who thought he had made the right choice. Argith fell, and Graigoroth understood. There was no negotiation left. No surrender that would not end in execution. No escape through snow and siege. Only the vow he had made when he filled the chambers below. If we die, so do they. He stumbled toward the lower levels, blood trailing behind him from wounds he no longer felt. His vision blurred, his hands shook. But they found the fuse. He lit it. The flame caught, a small orange glow in the darkness, crawling along the cord like a living thing, slow, inevitable. It wound through the frozen corridors, past empty barracks and abandoned armories, descending toward the powder kegs stacked in the fort's foundation. Above, the Order of the Northern Sky began their assault. Below, the flame reached the kegs. The explosion tore Fort Zeakden apart. The blast was heard across Galleon, a sound like thunder splitting the earth. The shockwave flattened the outer walls, sent stone and timber and bodies hurtling into the sky. The brigade was annihilated in an instant. Dozens of Northern Sky soldiers were buried in the rubble. Delita Heiral vanished in the fire, presumed dead. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but ash, rubble, and silence. The kingdom called it justice. The rebels who heard the news called it murder. Within a year, no one called it anything at all. The Corpse Brigade was erased. Not from history. History requires someone to remember. They were erased from memory itself, reduced to a footnote in military reports no one would read. A failed rebellion. A minor disruption during the kingdom's recovery. Forgotten. But 2 men survived Fort Zeakden. Delita Heiral, presumably consumed by the flames, would disappear into the chaos of Ivalice. He would abandon his name, his past, and his loyalty to the nobility that had killed his sister. When he returned, it would be as someone else entirely. A manipulator, a strategist, a man who understood that power in Ivalice was not earned through honor, but seized through calculation. And Wiegraf Folles, absent from the fort's destruction. He would wander the ruins of his rebellion, searching for meaning in the ashes. He would find something else instead. Something that whispered promises in the dark. Something that showed him how to make the nobles scream the way Milleuda had screamed. Fort Zeakden was not the end of the Corpse Brigade's story. It was the spark that ignited the War of the Lions. And the fire it started would burn Ivalice to the ground. The kingdom called Fort Zeakden a victory. An outlaw band destroyed. Order restored. The official reports were brief. 37 rebels killed, minimal crown casualties. 1 civilian death deemed unavoidable. The incident was filed, archived, and forgotten within a month. But the bodies told a different story. Crown soldiers buried them in unmarked graves outside Igros, far from the chapels where nobles laid their dead. No priests spoke over them. No families were notified. The crown did not want martyrs, so it made ghosts instead. Within weeks, the purge began. Crown soldiers and bounty hunters tracked brigade survivors through Gallione and Lassalia. Towns that had sheltered rebels, or simply failed to report them, faced audits, heavier taxes, garrison occupation. In Dorder, a merchant who had sold grain to the brigade was hanged in the market square. His crime was not treason, it was being caught. The message was clear. The Corpse Brigade had never existed, and anyone who remembered otherwise would join them. But erasing the brigade did not erase what created it. The fields remained empty. War debt still crushed the peasantry. Nobles withdrew to their estates, while commoners starved in the mud. The kingdom had eliminated a symptom. The sickness remained, festering in silence. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. The Corpse Brigade became a story. Not the Crown's story. The one about outlaws and justice and order restored. A different story. One passed between farmers at harvest time, between laborers in the quarries, between mothers warning their sons not to die for men who would never remember their names. The story was always the same. Once, there were people who said no. They were not saints. They were not heroes. They kidnapped a child. They burned supply lines. They killed crown soldiers who were only following orders. But they were also the only ones who stood up when standing up meant death. And the kingdom destroyed them for it. They left no monuments. No songs were sung in their honor in the courts of Lassalia. But their defiance was not forgotten. It became something the crown could never erase. A memory passed from hand to hand in the dark. Not as legend, as warning. That when justice is denied long enough, it does not beg. It takes. The Corpse Brigade died at Fort Zeakden. But the questions they asked survived. Can justice be won from the bottom up? Or does power in Ivalice only flow one way? from the nobles down, crushing everything beneath it. Delita Heiral would answer by becoming a manipulator, seizing power through calculation and betrayal. Ramza Beoulve would answer by abandoning his noble name to fight for truth, even when truth made him a heretic. The Corpse Brigade answered with steel and fire, not through politics or subterfuge, but through open rebellion against a system that had already declared them expendable. They weren't saints. They kidnapped a child, they burned supply lines, they killed soldiers who were following orders. Yet they were also the only ones who looked at Ivalice's corruption and said, "Not one more day. Not one more life." And the kingdom destroyed them for it. History called them outlaws. The church called them heretics. The nobles called them a cautionary tale, proof that commoners who reach for power will always burn. But among the poor, they became something else. Not heroes, not martyrs. A warning that when a system denies you justice, dignity, and the right to survive, resistance isn't a choice. It's inevitable. The Corpse Brigade wasn't the first rebellion Ivalice had seen, and it wouldn't be the last. Within months, the kingdom fractured into the Lion War, a succession crisis that pitted Duke Larg against Duke Goltana, Ivalice's two most powerful nobles. The conflict killed thousands and reshaped the kingdom. The brigade didn't start that war. They proved something the nobles tried to hide. Ivalice was already burning. The War of the Lions simply made the flames visible. Fort Zeakden wasn't the beginning of Ivalice's collapse. It was the moment the collapse could no longer be ignored. And in the ruins of that fort, Wiegraf Folles would find something that would transform his rebellion into something far darker. A power that didn't care about justice, only vengeance.